Hello and welcome to ConTinual, the convention that never ends. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and the topic tonight is weird Westerns. Everything that happens in a Western setting that you really wish happened or you really wish you could run away from. And with us to discuss this are five wonderful authors who represent not only books on the page, words on the page, but also the gaming world. And I will let them tell you all about themselves, starting with Nicole Givens-Kurtz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Gibbons-Carricks. I am a Weird West writer. I also teach a class on writing Weird Westerns for Speculative Fiction Academy, as well as Clarion West. I am the author. I have a story in Straight Outta Tombstone by Bain, as well as a collection of Weird Western stories called Sisters of the Wild Sage, which has been edited by Misty Massey, as well as a short story in Weird Western anthology called Misty.
I'll show it when it's my turn.
When it's time. All right. But I've been writing Weird Westerns for roughly about 10 years now. I also run Mocha Memoirs Press, which is a small press that our mission is to amplify marginalized voices in speculative fiction. So that's why I'm on this panel.
Wonderful. Well, with an intro like that, I have to go to Misty next.
So hi, I'm Misty Massey. I'm a novelist. I write the Mad Kestrel series of pirate novels. And yes, the second book is really going to come out this year. So woohoo. When I'm not writing, I am an editor. I'm an acquisitions editor for Lore Seekers Press, and I'm a copy editor for Falstaff Books. And every now and then I edit anthologies of short stories, two of which have been Weird Westerns. And the one that Nicole was trying to think of the title is called Lawless Lands, Tales of the Weird Frontier. And we're very, very proud of this book. It's from Falstaff. So if you're interested, look for the title or go to Falstaff and you can read a wonderful story by Nicole Givens Kurtz. Woo!
Great. Susan and Clay, please tell us how you come into this genre.
Hi, we're Clay. We're Clay and Susan Griffith. I'm Clay. She's Susan. We write historical fantasy primarily, and some years ago, we wrote multiple short stories for Pinnacle Games when they were doing fiction. I think they still do some fiction based on their Deadlands RPG, tabletop role-playing game. And then we wrote a novel based on their science fiction Weird Western called Lost Colony. So we've done Weird Western many years ago, and actually we're both separately working on Weird Western novels now that we'll probably hand back and forth, and they'll be co-written at some point.
Okay, cool. And you haven't killed each other yet?
Not so far.
Not yet. It's close.
I am amazed. Collaboration is a really tough gig. Anyway, Gini, what about you?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books, and I write under a variety of other pen names, including Gemma Chase, G.J. Koch, A.E. Stanton, J.C. Koch, and Anita Ensel. And as Anita Ensel, I, like Nicole, have a story in Gunfight on Europa Station. As A.E. Stanton, I have a Weird West story in Superstitions, Tales of the Mountains. And also as A.E. Stanton, I have my New West series. First installment is When Josie Comes Home, and the second is Deacon's Ark. All of these are varying Weird West settings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the first thing to ask is, there are a lot of Weird West books out there. You just handed, you talked about all of the collections you're in. You've all, Misty and Nicole talked about theirs. Clay and Susan talked about the Deadlands series. Hey, hasn't anybody told you guys Westerns are dead?
Mhm.
Yes.
All the time.
Over and over.
Yeah, all the time. Constantly, never ends. So it's actually, I think weird Westerns aren't dead. I think Western Westerns are struggling. But the nice thing about Weird West is that it can slot into so many different areas, into horror, into fantasy, into science fiction, that people who still, want to see a gunslinger, want to see a cowboy can fit it in and have a really good time with it. And readers are clearly interested. So I don't think weird Westerns are dead. Westerns are struggling, but not the weird side.
Okay.
I
Misty?
dare.
Oh,
go ahead.
Nicole,
I didn't
go
know
ahead.
you. I didn't know you were
Go
calling
ahead.
on people. Sorry. I was going to say that in terms of Westerns themselves, I'm not sure that. I think your white guy Western is kind of on the fringe there, but Netflix just released The Holiday Fall, which is a Black Western, and then there was a remake of with Denzel Washington recently as well. Yep. And so with a Black and very diverse lead group of 7, they diversified the 7. I think those are still extremely popular, and a lot of my weird Westerns, and Misty knows this as well, tend to be the other people in the West and not your usual white hat protagonist or storyline, right? So I think that what we're seeing is not that Westerns are dying, but that those diverse voices in the West are the kind of voices that we want, like Reservation Dogs series on Hulu. We're starting to see a lot of other stories and voices from the West, the old West or the traditional West, in terms like what was the one that was on AMC a while back with Common and
Hell on Wheels.
Hell on Wheels, right? So
Yeah,
I still, and it was super popular. So, and these are not weird Westerns, these are traditional Westerns, but they're centered on those other voices, those other experiences. The Ballad of Billy Shrugs that was on Netflix was also a very traditional Western anthology segment. So I don't think Westerns themselves are so much as on the fringe per se. I think that your traditional John Wayne, Clint Eastwood Western is done, right? I think those other voices coming, here's what else could have happened in the West. Those stories are still very popular and finding a fandom or viewers.
I agree. I think that people, white audiences in particular, are becoming more sensitized, or slowly becoming more sensitized to the fact that like you said, white hat characters in the West were really pretty brutal and cruel and awful, and there were so many. When we were looking for submissions to Lawless Lands, one of the things we said was, you can write a story about a white gunslinger fighting with a white ranch owner if that's what you really want to do, but we're going to look more favorably on stories that aren't about the white cowboy, that aren't about the white schoolmarm. We're going to look at stories if you feature Native American people, if you feature the Chinese people, if you feature Black people, we're going to be more interested, because those are the stories that haven't gotten told enough, and those are the ones we want to hear. And so I think I agree, the traditional Western is not dying, but changing, and for the better. But I also think that weird Westerns lend themselves well to those other cultures, those other voices, because there are traditions that we can draw from, and that writers can draw from, and tell these stories that growing up with the white hat cowboy stories we just never heard before.
Right.
So, and I think it's exciting.
Okay. Cool.
It's a gradual evolution. I mean, the same thing happened with the vampire series, that you get tired of the same old thing, so people want to see new things come through. I mean, the Westerns. I mean, the Red Dead Redemption game that came out 2 years ago swept the award.
Yes.
And they had a mix of characters that I fell in love with all of them, from Charles that was half Black, half Native American. We had Lenny, who was an African American. We had so many different cultures coming into that game. I would have loved to have seen, you know, us being able to play in a variety of those different kind of roles. But this fact that Westerns are still in the forefront, in Weird West and everything is just an evolution, and Weird West is the newest evolution that's really come to play, and putting that diversity out there, you know, it makes the whole genre more exciting. Just like any other genre, it has this constant mode of evolution, and we're just in this newest stage of evolution, so we can't wait to see where it goes.
I think where Westerns have gone, and I actually might push back a little bit on the death of the white hat, white man Western. I work in a library, and Westerns are wildly popular with our patrons. Mainstream publishers have abandoned them. And the way they seem to be published more and more these days, if you look at there's a guy named William Johnstone who writes the whitest of white Westerns. Yes. It's frightening how white they are. They are old school, and he's been dead for years, but he's still churning them out.
Like V.C. Andrews and the Flowers in the Attic, huh?
And it's obviously there's a machine of people, or a barn full of people, you know, over typewriters churning this stuff out. Primarily, I think distributed by subscription. I think people buy them and they're mailed to them. I don't know that you could go into a Barnes and Noble and find them. I saw an ad just on Twitter, actually, for another publisher that was soliciting for mainstream Western writers, and they wanted people who could produce 30,000 words every 2 or 3 months, because they had a huge stable of writers. Now, those people may come and go very quickly, but they were looking to churn material, and this was pretty mainstream traditional stuff. I agree with you that Westerns are expanding and taking in other types of characters on the frontier, which is great. But it's just one of those areas that mainstream publishing has turned its back on. But because there is an audience, writers and publishers are finding ways to reach that audience.
You know, I have to agree with Clay on that. Now that I think about it, my mom is a huge Yellowstone fan, like huge Yellowstone fan. And I remember her being a big Longmire fan as well. So there are, well, I mean, that's why I write Westerns, because my mom is a big Western fan. And so in my house, it was Star Trek and it was Westerns.
Well, that's what it was.
I mean, that's what it was. And Star Trek is a Western. So
it is.
Wagon Train to the Stars. Yep. So we did that. And so my mom, now I take it back, I agree with Clay now. Now that I think about it, there is a huge audience for, and those are very soapy white guy hero Westerns. So yeah.
What
I think Clay's point is the biggest one, is that mainstream publishing, when they make the decision that, oh, we're sick of this, we don't think it sells, that's why the feeling is out there that, oh, well, they're not really there. But the readers, like when I was first getting an agent way back when, now I'm happy to say, vampires, oh, no one wants to see vampires anymore. And I was like, you're all high. Readers are never getting rid of vampires. You guys are sick of them, but the readers aren't. And I think that's it. I think we've got, there's also editorial that changes with, maybe they didn't grow up on Westerns, and it's got to, you know, churn back around. But I think Clay's point is really the most key, is that the mainstream publishers, the big guys, are saying, and so that gives the feeling that it's not wanted. When, you know, all of us are running around, you know, as soon as Nicole started talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that one and that one and that one. So it's out there and people want it, but some of the big guys don't. And I think Clay is completely correct there. And that's why we would even think it's dead in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. When we, you know, so often in literature, whether it be mainstream or not, you put a label on something, Weird Western, and people try to define it very narrowly. What do you think are the limits on Weird Westerns beyond the setting, or are there any?
I mean, I don't think there is a limit because, I mean, even look at Firefly. I mean, took the Western in a whole new out to outer space. I mean, there is so much that's untapped. I mean, they tried to do the same thing with alternate history, where they call it, with, you know, with steampunk even. It's still alternate history. It doesn't matter that it has a name that's that they think is gonna define it. It really has no definition. It can still be out there. Just because, you know, they're now claiming steampunk is dead doesn't mean that it's really gone. We still have it. It's just called alternate history. It's where it always was in alternate history.
Yes.
And Westerns, I mean, it can go any direction. I remember reading stuff when I was a kid that was weird Western. It was a gunslinger with a magic pistol that would go around shooting and rode a ghost horse. I was like completely entranced. But so it's always there. It will always be there. It's just going to have to find new audiences and let them rediscover and you know, these new topics. And it really is. I get so annoyed with these little catchphrases and these little boxes that people put us in, because writing in fiction is so much more beyond that.
Imagination is beyond that, you know.
It is.
Feels like it's all done so people can put it on the right shelf, and that's it. Not, you know, I do realize that we have a lot of readers out there that really only want whatever is in what they consider their lane or their box. But a lot of these designations, I mean, I remember years ago, everything that is now chopped up into various things fell under speculative fiction. And a few years ago, they were trying to make speculative fiction this like tiny thing. It's like, no, pretty much all genre is in speculative fiction because we're speculating about something. So I'm totally with you. I don't like well, if we say it's X, then you could only do these things. The minute you expand, it's something different. No, it's just all, you know, like Nicole said, it's all imagination.
I mean, I agree. There's really no limit. Like Susan was saying, you know, you don't like being, if there's not enough West anymore on the planet, you can go out into space. We have a story in Lawless Lands that's about a Native American tribe that lives in a spaceship and travels around and herds these creatures that look like manta rays and live in the vacuum of space and fly and float through the nothingness, and they herd them. And so this whole story is kind of a cattle drive, but in space, you know, by a Native American tribe instead of cowboys, and with these animals instead of cows. And so, you know, it's still a Western, even though it's in the future and in space.
Yeah, so I know I've been on panels and I've gotten blasted on panels for saying this before, but I definitely think that when you look at things like Trigun, if you look at anime like Cowboy Bebop and Trigun and Gangbusters, not Gangbusters, a few other ones that are set in space or set in Western desert planets. I mean, and weird things happen and bad things happen, and it's very much a gunplay. Those are all weird Westerns. I mean, they just are.
The Mandalorian.
It's the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Totally.
Exactly. The Mandalorian.
It's Lone Wolf and Cub, right? It's Lone Wolf and Cub. Reimagined.
Mandalorian is a rollicking, hidden baby cowboy story.
It is.
Yes.
So three godfathers lives, only it's one guy in a bucket. Yes. And speaking of Cowboy Bebop, you know, so many of the shows open with the bounties and the two presenters in the cowboy hats and the boots.
Killjoys. Killjoys is another one. Yeah. I just want to mention this entire anthology that Nicole and I are both in is all set in space. And it's all every story has a Western theme or feel to it. Point blank, they're all Westerns, weird ones set in space. So,
I want to toss out like Star Trek Discovery because it's set so many thousands of years in the future, and they have a new frontier, no pun intended, to explore. And it's not a new area of space, but it's a new time. And so a lot of what they're doing is very revolutionary, kind of feeling things out. It's all new. And it's a new territory. And so it's very much a Western in that feel, that you have a group of people who have been taken from an area that they're comfortable with, say, for example, the East Coast, and moving to a place, say the Southwest, is very different. And so you have a similar thing happening in Star Trek Discovery or in Star Trek period, right? Any version of Star Trek you want to toss out there has episodes where it's very much a new terrain. What resources do we have? And go West, young man, feel to it.
Well, I think the Western has a lot of themes that can be reused and recycled and has an emotional impact. The reason those stories resonated with people is because of those journeys, of those transitions that people were being forced into or trying to go on. So those themes continue to be resonating no matter what story or what veneer you've put on them. At the base heart, you still have those stories and those emotional connections for those. So, you know, I mean, you look at the Book of Boba Fett, it's now turning into the Magnificent Seven. You've got Cad Bane, who's a gunslinger, coming into an old town and doing a whole gun. I mean, all those things resonate with us because they're part of our, you know, part of our legacy and our legend. And whether they're wrong or right, we can make them right. We can make them better. We can make them so much more what they could have been and should have been. So yeah, that's that kind of stuff to me.
Do you feel there is that element in the Weird Western, looking at the frontier as we have experienced it as a nation and going, you know, this is a very exciting thing. We're going into the wild. We are going into these new spaces that are completely foreign. I mean, imagine coming to New Mexico when all you've ever seen are the green hills of England or New England. It is literally like going to Mars, which is an amazing thing. But the things that happened out there replayed all of the injustices of what was happening elsewhere in the world. We were taking the land of indigenous peoples who had lived there since they arrived 1,000 years prior, and civilized the virgin territory. We took it over saying, oh, that's not civilization. Or we brought all of our prejudices about color, about gender, about gender fluidity into new things. Oh, you can't do this, but oops, wait, we don't have any women. Suddenly you're gold, you know. And suddenly all of these ladies of the evening are becoming people who are now protecting their history. So it does the Weird Western basically, or any alternate history, give you the opportunity to redress the wrongs of the past and hopefully create a better future by talking about them in different ways. Thoughts?
This whole book,
can do that.
if you can see it, you can't see it, but this whole book, I mean, Misty will tell you, all of my stories, all the protagonists in my stories, especially my Weird Westerns, they're all women for the most part. They're all people of color. They're either African American, Native American, or Hispanic. Because I lived in New Mexico for 6 years, and I lived in the northwest corner of New Mexico, where I taught Navajo and Zuni students English. I was their English teacher. And so I got to I bought a house out there and loved it. I mean, there was no coming back for me from New Mexico. And actually, there are large chunks of me still there. But my stories speak about from those perspectives of the others in the Southwest. And so all of my stories, whether they're in lawless lands or wherever, that's what they talk about. And that's where they come from. And they address those types of issues. Not every single one addresses like racism or whatever, or gender issues or gender equality, but they do come from those perspectives, and looking through the West and what's happening with a very different lens than most people are used to seeing.
I mean, I think you can do that with anything. I have a, I wouldn't call it a traditional Western, but it's a novel set in the Old West that, again, it's the primary character is female. It's addressing gender issues. It's addressing skin color issues and all these other things. I just think I think we can do that in everything. I like that we can do whatever we want with a weird Western, and there aren't any rules we have to follow. So you can indeed, you can make your protagonist a space Cthulhu if you wanted to, and that could come in and do whatever you want. So I think it's really more the aspect of what you, the author, want to make sure you get across to your readers. And I mean, I know you're doing that, you know what I mean? But I think you could have done it. I think you could have been doing it. I think you could do it in anything you were writing, not just weird Western, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I'm not sure Space Cthulhu would be able to have the same type of experiences as an African American in the West. So
no, but it could be what I'm saying is it could come in and it could show a reflection of what the writer thinks is right or wrong.
Those ideals, sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not saying that it could be a white person. I don't think it could be a black person. It couldn't be a person, but it could absolutely say, that's not how we do things. Why are you doing it like that?
I think the value of the weird Western in the sense that Nicole's talking about is that we obviously all like Westerns. We like the basic concepts of them. We like the feel of them, the feel of the horizon.
Yep.
Getting to ride a horse, getting to walk down the street with a gun on your hip and a hat and having a drink in the saloon. The weird Western lets the underserved participate in that playground that previously was just Hoss and Little Joe. Now it can be people who don't look like Hoss and Little Joe. It can be anybody, and everybody wants to be a cowboy, and now everybody can. And you can explore those.
No, I'm going to argue, but I'm going to argue that. I'm going to argue that because I'm going to go back to Posse, okay, which was, this movie is like 20 years old or more, and it was not a weird Western. It is absolutely about a group of mostly African-American former slaves who are going after the horrible colonel they got stuck under with like one little white guy, good old Stephen Baldwin. And they're still it's absolutely showing an underrepresented group of people and how they're dealing with it. There's nothing weird Western about it. What I'm saying is that I think Jean Marie's question, we should be doing that in everything we write, not just a weird Western. I personally think that we are part of your job or your onus as an author is if you have a belief you really want people to see, or there's a group of people you really think are underserved, and God knows we're spoilt for choice, right? That should reflect somewhere in your writing, not in everything you write, but it doesn't only have to be done in a weird Western.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, we're on the same page. I don't mean that the people who are underserved by traditional Westerns are underserved because history has scrubbed them from the story.
Yes.
But, and we were talking about weird Westerns. I mean, you can use weird Western as a vehicle for doing that. But yes, I'm totally in agreement with what you're saying.
Misty, any thoughts?
No. I don't really have anything to add to that hasn't already been said. So
okay. Well, we've been talking about things in general.
Yep.
Why now I want to get particular. I'm going to ask y'all to tell us a little bit about one or two of the Weird West stories that you were most proud of having written, or if you haven't written any, having edited. So, Misty, start us off with that.
Oh, golly. Well, I am, like I said, I have edited not only Lawless Lands for Falstaff, but before that, I edited another anthology called The Weird Wild West for eSpec Books. And that was, again, Weird Western stories. And I would show you one, but I sold out of them at the Renaissance Fair this year.
Oh,
so.
how wonderful.
I know. So I can't show you.
I was there for that.
I know. It was crazy. People were buying books like there was no tomorrow, and we were going, yes, here, take some more.
All the books.
All the books. Oh, I think, Nicole, you had one left, didn't you, when you left? But anyway, but that's not what we're talking about. I have edited 2 anthologies of Weird Western short stories, and in the meantime, I am writing a series of novellas for Falstaff featuring Doc Holliday, the gunslinger, who has come back from the dead. And there are reasons he came back from the dead, and there are reasons that why he's sticking around and that sort of thing. They're going to be his John Hartness's Shadow Council archives is where the books will fall. And I just, in the 3rd book, which I'm still working on, I'm really excited about it because I was wandering around on Facebook one day, like you do, and ran across, I scrolled past this article. I have some Facebook friends that are in Australia, and I scrolled past this article somebody in Australia had posted, and the title was 7 Axes Adelaide. Now, it was about a TV network called 7 that was no longer going to be serving Adelaide, the city in Australia. So 7 Axes cuts off Adelaide. Right. Perfectly ordinary little headline in a news article, right? Well, I read 7 Axes Adelaide, and all of a sudden this character just leaped into my head. And so this 3rd book that I'm writing for Falstaff, she is the main antagonist to Doc Holliday. And she's so cool. And I'm really excited for people to get to read her, but I don't want to tell you yet because they're not out yet. But she's very, very cool. She has a humanoid look, but she's not human. And she travels with a carnival full of
we lost
of other people who are either, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Okay. A carnival of other people.
Carnival of other people who are either human with special abilities or human looking but not at all human. And I'm really excited for people to read that.
Cool.
So it'll be, I'm thinking probably next year maybe. So
yeah. I think Falstaff is going to have a lot of Weird West next year. As I said before we started the panel, they have one of mine. I take a slightly different view than the adventure and killing monsters, etc. Mine's called Siren Bridge, and the concept is Maverick with magic in skirts. So this is going to be quite a breadth of stories that we're going to have. Yes, Oleander Jones is absolutely no better than she should be. Anyway, Clay and Susan, what are you you said you were working on some Weird West stories, and you'd written some in the past. Give us the flavor of some of them.
Yeah, we did a couple of short stories, but actually I did enjoy writing the novel, which was called Banshee Screams back in the day, but it was still a Weird West set in on another planet. But I love the concept of the lead heroine, who was surrounded by all these gunslinger guys, and she was the one who reaches out and figures out the issue, makes contact with the aliens, which are basically part of the Native American angle to that, and brings them into the whole storyline and their mysticism. And it's their mysticism that saves the day by making sure the settlers figure out what the heck is actually going on this planet. It's because they listened for a change rather than fighting against, and thinking they knew best. And that story still, that character still resonates with me all the time. And I really enjoyed that. In terms of what I'm working on now is basically Due South meets Red Dead Redemption meets Aliens. So it's basically Bounty and his dog, which is actually a werewolf, and meeting up with a cowboy, and then going out and, you know, trying to figure out what all these monsters are that are attacking, but by bringing in the Native Americans again, the Native culture, because they've been experiencing, they know this history, they've had this recorded. It's just that, of course, the white man never listens to anything and just goes through. But, you know, that's sort of where my storylines are going. Clay's probably got something.
No, mine was simpler, I think, than that, maybe too simple. It's sort of like D&D. It's as if you took a Western and made it into D&D, where the archetypes of the Westerns are the character types, or the roles, the gunslingers, singing cowboys, et cetera, et cetera. And it's set in a West where the Native American nations are still in control because there's magic, and they dominate the magical world. And there are little enclaves of American territories. Instead of the entire West, they just have little areas, and you can travel in and out, go back and forth as long as the Native American nations allow you to. And if you get too annoying to them, they raise armies of dog soldiers, and they stomp you out.
Wow.
And so we'll see. I'm hopefully only about 10,000 words from the end. But last time I was 10,000 words from the end of a book, I had to go on Facebook and threaten that if I didn't finish by a certain time, I'd dress up like a fairy princess and post the pictures.
So close to getting that.
And I did finish, and I may have to do the same again this time.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's a great deadline keeper. Trust me.
Unless your wife undermines it, just because she's in a fairy costume.
Nice.
Kitty, tell us a bit. You know, we actually shared some Weird West space in the Clockwork universe, steampunk versus
We did.
alien.
We did. That was my first. That's the first steampunk story in my alien universe, which I have 3 short stories, and then book 17, which I swear to God will be done, is set in that universe. But that isn't really what I was going to talk about. I was going to actually talk about my story in Superstitions, Tales of the Mountains. I was born and raised in Southern California, and I lived for 22 years in Phoenix, and I love and still very much miss the Southwest. And I started writing in Phoenix. I ended up becoming an Old West expert, and so on and so forth. So when we could write stories about the Superstitions Mountains, I absolutely wanted to write one about Coyote. Coyote is the Native American trickster god. He is very important. And it was kind of a nice, it was fun for me to do in a variety of ways. One, I got to do Coyote, and I'm hoping I can do more Coyote stories because it was great. It was just fun to do Coyote and the Dory Between the Worlds. And the Superstitions, that's where, you know, the Lost Dutchman mine is, except geologically, there's no way in the world there's gold there. And my take on that is that the Apache tribes have, there isn't gold there. What that is the doorway to essentially hell. And it needs to be guarded, and that's Coyote's job, but he doesn't want to do something boring. So he finds people to do it, and he tricks them into it. And one of my favorite things, it's a multiracial a group of characters that are all going, they've all been kind of lured up there. And only my one, my main character, my MC, he is the only one that's actually really evil. Everybody else is, you know, looking forward to sharing the gold. There, you know, there's 8 of them now, and I really thought it was just going to be the 1 or 2, but by gosh, you know, they're in it together, and he's just ready to kill them all. So he gets his well-deserved comeuppance. But it was just fun to have Coyote do it, and all of those things. So I like I like being able to work Native American theology into what I'm doing. I've always been very interested in it. And because of all the stuff I write that isn't Weird West, I know when I want to take something and go, look, I can do this. So I'm very proud of that story. I really, like I said, I really enjoyed writing it. I don't always get to write a story like that for an anthology. So it was very fun.
Nicole?
Right. So right now I'm working on fantasy mysteries. So I'm not writing weird westerns at the moment. But probably one of my most popular and unnerving, because most of my weird westerns lean heavily into horror. So my yeah, they're all horror stories. Is and Misty knows this one. It's Belly Speaker. It's about a young girl who's she's a ventriloquist, and her doll is called Mama. And yeah, horrible things. Yeah, so
story.
So Mama is, of course, if you've ever seen the Twilight Zone story, Mama actually talks, and Mama tells her what to do. It kind of is her mama. Her mother was burned in a fire by a witch, and she was burned. They thought she was a witch, and she was a former slave. And yeah, so Belly Speaker is probably my most popular one. It's the one I don't read. Again, I would read the first chapter, but I don't read. Like, I read the first section on readings, but I don't spend a lot of time. I was going through a lot emotionally and personally in my life. I had lost my voice. Someone had taken it from me. It was a really difficult time, and all that got put in the Belly Speaker. Is a painful read for me personally, but it's a really good story. People always like that when they always talk about how it gives them chills or how it was unsettling. And so it intrigued me, right? A ventriloquist who doesn't actually have her own voice and who must find that voice and be able to assert it. So that's the point of Belly Speaker. And yeah, so it's set in New Mexico, the New Mexico territory in 1901. Pretty much like actually the entire collection of weird westerns are set in New Mexico, either in the territory before it became a state after 1901, or in the future of New Mexico, a futuristic dystopian New Mexico. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's in Lawless Lands, right?
It is.
Anthology. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It is in Lawless Lands.
I saw Misty holding up the book.
Yep, it's in Lawless Lands.
Great.
In case anybody wants to read it.
Just in case, yeah. Okay, we are coming. We could undoubtedly keep talking on this subject and start going into recommendations of who does it really well. But we are unfortunately coming up against our time. So I'm going to ask everybody to tell us what your latest release is, where folks can find it, and where they can find you on the web. Now, Weird Western or not is not relevant here. This is the necessary promotional aspect of the panel. So I'm going to start with you, Nicole.
So you can find my latest release, which is I Theft Most Foul. It's the second in the Kingdom of Avis series. It's a mystery fantasy series. You can find it at Amazon or at mochamemoirspress.com. You can find most of my works there. You can also find me there. You can also find me on Twitter at Nicole G. Kurtz. And the same thing at Facebook, Nicole G. Kurtz, Patreon, Nicole G. Kurtz.
Great. Okay. Susan and Clay?
We haven't published anything in a bit, but like I said, we've got things in the works. But you can always find us with the Vampire Empire series and the Crown and Key series. That's still out there, and hopefully soon we'll have the Monstrance series, which is a New York magic bound around like 1930s story as well, and hopefully our Weird West stories come out soon too. So
yeah. Oh, great era for New York, the Stork Club and all of the things that were going on in the theater and all the movie people that were training back and forth between New York and LA, and The best, yeah, the music of Harlem, all of those wonderful things.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, great period. Misty, what about you? What's you talked about having some books come out from Falstaff, but you got some stuff that's available now, and where can folks find you?
Well, my first novel, Mad Kestrel, which is an adventure of magic and fantasy on the high seas, is available where fine books are sold, but probably Amazon. It's published by Lore Seekers Press, and the second book, like I said, is going to be coming out later this year. For Reals and Honest
For true.
True, I swear it's really coming out this year. Also for true, also from Lore Seekers Press. Up with me and know as soon as I tell everybody where you can find it, you can go to my website, which is mistymassey.com. You can visit me on Twitter, where I'm a bit snarky at times, but yeah, okay, I'm Misty Massey on Twitter, and I'm Misty Massey on Facebook. And if you just loved listening to me yatter on and you want to hear my voice more, you're welcome to listen to the Calamity Janes, which is a sister podcast to the Authors and Dragons podcast. And we play D&D. It's a group of women, and we play D&D once a month under the auspices of the Authors and Dragons podcast. And you can find that wherever fine podcasts are given away.
Wonderful. And Ginny, I know you've got lots of releases out there.
I do. In addition to, I'm going to show it one more time because both Nicole and I are in this. In addition to Gunfight on Europa Station, where we finally, thank you, supply chain issues, have physical copies in our hot little hands. Boy, didn't that take forever. It wasn't Bane's fault. That was all supply chain. I have a short story, The Darkening and Silence in the City. I don't have Silence in the City to hold up. Thank you, supply chain. But I do have the first two. It's the prequel to my New West series. So how it actually all starts hundreds of years before when Josie comes home. So that is out. That's The Darkening by me writing A.E. Stanton. And that is in the Silence in the City anthology that just released. Okay. So presumably, like Misty, where fine books are sold, most likely Amazon. So
and where can folks find you on the web?
Okay, you can find me at my website, www.ginikoch.com. I am on Twitter at Gini Koch. I'm on Facebook in 3 different ways: Gini Koch, author Gini Koch, Hairspray and Rock and Roll, and author of the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series. And for everyone who is asking, yes, I swear to you, book 17, Aliens Like Us, is really, really close to being really close to being really close to being done. I'm now officially like 5 years late on this. I've moved into George R. R. Martin territory, and without any of George's money. Okay, so I just have the stress, none of the cash. So anyway, it's coming. I swear to you, I really mean it.
I believe you, for what that's worth. Anyway, thank you all for a great panel. And thank you out there for watching us from ConTinual, the convention that never ends.